You clicked because you saw those words, 25 forgotten Amish snacks, and something in you already knew that what your grandmother set on the table tasted better than anything in a plastic wrapper today. You were right. I'm going to show you that most of what the Amish snacked on cost pennies, kept for weeks without a refrigerator, and fed a working family through a winter. I learned this the hard way, standing in a cold kitchen in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, being handed a wooden spoon by a woman who never once opened a store-bought box in her life. Her name was Fannie, and she was in her 70s when she took me in and let me watch. The first thing she ever showed me was a string of dried apples hanging over the wood stove like a garland, and she said, "That is candy. That is winter. That is money you don't spend." I never forgot it. And by the end of this, I'm going to give you the one recipe I promised her I'd pass on, a fried hand pie the old families carried into the fields that stayed good for 2 weeks without any ice at all. I saved it for last on purpose. But everything I show you today works in the kitchen you already have, with a stove you already own, no farm required. So let me start where Fannie started me, with the apples. The Pennsylvania Dutch called them schnitz, and if you ever hear that word, it simply means fruit cut and dried. In the 1700s, when German families settled the Lancaster Valley, they had no way to keep an autumn harvest of apples through to spring, so they cut them into rings or slivers, cored them, and hung them in the warm air above the hearth until they turned leathery and sweet. Children ate them like we eat chewy candy. And here is the part that surprised me most when Fannie explained it. Drying does not just preserve the apple, it concentrates the sugar. A fresh apple is about 85% water. Pull that water out, and every bite becomes 3 or 4 times sweeter, ounce for ounce, than the fruit you started with. You can do this tonight in your own oven. Slice apples thin, lay them on a rack, set your oven as low as it goes, prop the door open a crack with a wooden spoon, and let them go for 6 to 8 hours. That is it. No dehydrator, no special tool. When I first tried it in my own kitchen, I could not believe I'd spent years buying dried fruit at $9 a bag when a sack of apples cost me almost nothing. But the apples were only the beginning, because Fannie told me the real reason the old families dried everything they could get their hands on, and it had nothing to do with taste, it had to do with survival. Therefore, let me take you to the next stage, the one that turned dried fruit into something a family actually depended on. Those dried apple schnitz were not just a snack you nibbled, they were the raw material for schnitz pie and for a whole winter pantry. Fannie would take a handful of dried apples, cover them with water overnight, and by morning they had plumped back up, ready to be cooked down with a little cinnamon into a filling darker and richer than any fresh apple could ever make. This is why the old orchards mattered so much. An Amish family in the 1800s might dry 300 or 400 pounds of apples in a single autumn, and that pile of leather in the attic was insurance against a hard, hungry March. Now here is where I want you to feel the loss, because someone did profit from you forgetting this. When commercial canning and later the home freezer arrived in the early 20th century, the food companies had every reason to teach us that drying was old-fashioned and beneath us. Buy the can, buy the freezer, buy the bag. Every one of those steps put a little of your grocery money into somebody else's pocket and quietly took away the skill your great-grandmother used to feed 6 children on almost nothing. The Amish never let that skill go. And the deeper I got into Fannie's kitchen, the more I realized that drying apples was the simplest trick she knew. The next one made my jaw drop, because the next thing she showed me was dried sweet corn, and this one is nearly gone from the world. Most people have never tasted it, and that is a shame, because it is one of the most extraordinary flavors I have ever put in my mouth. In late summer, the Amish cut sweet corn off the cob at its milky peak, sometimes roasting or scalding it first, and then they dry it hard as gravel. It shrinks down to little amber pebbles you can store in a jar for a year, but when you soak those pebbles and warm them back up with a little butter and cream, something almost unbelievable happens. The drying caramelizes the corn's own sugars, and it comes back to life, tasting toasted, nutty, sweeter, and deeper than any corn you have ever eaten fresh. There is a reason Lancaster families guarded their dried corn recipe like treasure. I remember the first spoonful. I actually stopped and asked Fannie what she had put in it, because I was certain there was some secret ingredient, some sugar, some flavoring. She laughed at me. She said there was nothing in it but corn and thyme. That was the lesson. Time was the ingredient. The old families understood that patience itself created flavor, and we traded that patience away for convenience, and we have been poorer in the mouth ever since. Cottage industries in Pennsylvania still sell dried sweet corn today, and people pay premium prices, $10 and $12 a pound, for what a family once made for the cost of the corn in their own garden. But dried corn takes a garden and a season, and I promised you this works in the life you already have. Therefore, let me move to the snacks that need nothing but a pantry, the ones the Amish made in an afternoon, because this is where you start to see how clever these people really were. Take the humble, soft pretzel. Most folks think of it as a mall food, a modern thing. It is not. The Pennsylvania Dutch brought the pretzel from the old country, and the first commercial pretzel bakery in America opened in Lidditz, Pennsylvania, in 1861, run by a man named Julius Sturgis. But long before any bakery, Amish and Mennonite mothers were twisting them by hand at the kitchen table, because a pretzel is nothing but flour, water, yeast, and salt, the cheapest food on earth turned into something children would run to the table for. The secret that makes a real Amish soft pretzel, the thing the mall version fakes with chemicals, is the dip in baking soda water before baking. You bring a pot of water to a boil, stir in a few spoonfuls of baking soda, and dunk each raw pretzel for just a few seconds before it goes in the oven. That bath is what gives you the deep brown, chewy skin. Fannie dipped hers, and I watched the pale dough turn glossy in the water like magic. She never measured a thing. She would tell me, "You will feel when the dough is right," and after enough afternoons I did. A batch that fed her whole family cost less than $1 in ingredients. Think about what you pay for one at the mall. But the pretzel led me to something even better, because once you have that same simple dough, the Amish did not stop at salt. And this is where I need to talk to you directly, because I know some of you are thinking this all sounds nice for people with big farm kitchens and all day to bake. I put this next part in especially for you, for the person standing in a small apartment kitchen after a long day with a regular oven and a bag of flour and nothing special at all. Because the truth is, almost every snack Fannie taught me was born in exactly that situation, out of not having much. These were poor people's foods. They were designed to make a little go far, and they translate perfectly to the life you are living right now. Let me give you 3 of them you can make this week. The first is what the old families called a schnitz boy or half moon, but the everyday version is simply cinnamon flats. Scraps of pie dough rolled thin, sprinkled with cinnamon and a little sugar, and baked until crisp. Every Amish woman I ever met made these from the leftover dough after a pie, because wasting even a scrap of dough was unthinkable to them. You take what would have gone in the trash, and 10 minutes later your children have a warm, crackling treat. Nothing bought, nothing wasted. I cannot tell you how many times I have made these from pie scraps and had guests ask me where I bought such delicate cookies. The second is popcorn, but not the way you think. The Amish popped it in a heavy pot on the stove with a little lard or butter, and then, instead of drowning it in fake powder, they made popcorn balls with molasses or homemade syrup. In the 1800s, popcorn was one of the most common snacks in Pennsylvania farmhouses, because a single ear stored all winter and popped up into a bowlful. You warm molasses and a little butter and a pinch of baking soda until it foams, pour it over your popped corn, butter your hands, and press it into balls. Those popcorn balls were what Amish children got as a treat at Christmas and at school, and a batch costs you maybe 50 cents. I made them with my own grandchildren, and they forgot all about the store-bought candy on the counter. The third one is the one that changed how I think about snacking entirely, and it is called church spread, or sometimes peanut butter schmear. Now stay with me, because this is genius. The Amish take peanut butter and stretch it with a homemade marshmallow-like syrup and a little corn syrup or molasses, and it turns into a smooth, spreadable, sweet peanut butter that they slather thick on bread. They serve it at church lunches, which is where the name comes from, spread across long tables so that a small amount of expensive peanut butter feeds a whole congregation. It keeps for weeks in the pantry without refrigeration. One jar of peanut butter, stretched this way, feeds 2 or 3 times as many people. When Fannie first spread it on a slice of fresh bread and handed it to me, I understood immediately why the poorest families in the community never went without a treat. They had learned to stretch, and stretching, therefore, is the thread that runs through every single one of these snacks, because that is the villain I have been circling this whole time. Somewhere in the last 100 years, we were taught the opposite of stretching. We were taught to buy the finished thing, use it once, and throw the rest away. Every convenience food on the shelf is built on that idea that your time is worth nothing and your money is endless, so you should keep handing it over. The Amish rejected that whole way of thinking, and they were called backward for it, and now here we are, paying $12 a pound for dried corn our great-grandparents made for free. Who do you suppose profited from convincing us that the old way was too hard? If you find yourself asking that question more and more, I want you to know there is a place where I have gone much deeper into all of this in my book, which you can find linked in the description below, where I go through the full Amish framework behind these foods, from the dried pantry to the field snacks to the winter sweets, in a way that is designed to sit on your kitchen counter and actually get used. It is called Amish Reset, and whether you know it as Deeper Roots or the Amish Blueprint, the heart of it is the same. The complete system Fannie and families like hers use to feed everyone well on almost nothing, written down so it does not disappear. If today felt like the beginning of something for you, that book is where the beginning goes further. Let me keep going, because the sweets are where it gets almost unbelievable. There is a whole family of Amish candies made with nothing but the sweeteners a farm could produce. Sorghum was grown across Pennsylvania in the Midwest, and the Amish boiled it down into a thick, dark syrup, and from that syrup they made taffy and brittle and hard candy. Molasses taffy was a winter pastime, a whole family pulling a rope of warm candy until it turned pale and glossy, laughing in a warm kitchen with the snow coming down outside. That was the entertainment. That was the snack. Both at once, and it cost only what the molasses cost. Compare that to a bag of candy today and tell me who was living richer. Then there is maple. In the sugar maple country, the Amish tap their own trees in late winter and boil the sap down over open fires for days to make syrup and sugar, and here is a fact most people never learned. It takes about 40 gallons of raw maple sap to make just 1 gallon of finished syrup, 40 to 1. When you understand that number, you understand why real maple candy was precious, why a small square of maple sugar pressed in a little mold was a treasured gift for a child. The Amish made maple candy by heating the syrup and stirring it until it grained, then pressing it into little leaf shapes. It melts on your tongue like nothing else. And every bit of it came from a tree in the yard and a fire and patience. No factory, no wrapper, no middleman. But not every sweet was fancy, and this is important, because I do not want you thinking you need maple trees or a sorghum press. Some of the best Amish snacks came from the plainest cupboard imaginable. Cracker pudding is one. It sounds like nothing, and it is one of the most comforting things I have ever eaten. You take saltine crackers, crush them, and cook them into a simple custard of milk, egg, sugar, and a little coconut. The crackers soften and thicken the pudding, and what you get is a warm, creamy dessert from ingredients that cost almost nothing and never spoil on the shelf. The Amish serve cracker pudding at weddings. At weddings, a dish made from crackers, considered good enough for the most important day of a person's life, because they judged food by how it tasted and how it fed people, not by how much it cost. And that brings me to the whoopie pie, which many of you have heard of, but almost nobody knows the truth about. Two soft chocolate cakes with a sweet cream filling in the middle. The story I was told, sitting in Fannie's kitchen, is that Amish women baked these from leftover cake batter and tucked them into the lunch pails their husbands and children carried to the fields and to school. When the workers opened their lunch and found one, they would shout, "Whoopie," and the name stuck. Whether every detail of that story is exactly true or half legend, the heart of it is real. These were a way to use up batter and send a little joy into a hard-working day. Nothing wasted, everything stretched, a treat born from thrift. Now, I have been walking you up a ladder this whole time, from dried apples to corn to pretzels to candy, each one a little more clever than the last, because that is how Fannie taught me, one rung at a time. And I have held back the top of the ladder on purpose, the recipe I promised her I would pass on, the one I have been carrying for you since the very beginning. But before I hand it to you, I need you to understand why it is the most important of them all, and to understand that, I have to tell you about the fields. An Amish farmer in the summer does not come inside for lunch. The work is too far from the house and the day is too long, so food had to travel. It had to sit in a pail in the heat of a hayfield from dawn until the middle of the day and still be safe to eat, in a time before any ice, before any cooler, before refrigeration existed at all. Think about that problem for a moment. You need a sweet, filling, satisfying food that a man can carry into 90-degree heat and eat hours later without getting sick. Almost nothing we buy today could survive that. But the old family solved it, and the solution is the snack I saved for last. It is the fried schnitz pie, the half-moon hand pie, and the reason it works is buried in how it is made. Remember those dried apples from the very beginning, the schnitz hanging over Fannie's stove? Here is where they come full circle. You take the dried apples and cook them down with sugar and cinnamon into a thick, almost dry paste, so thick it barely has any free moisture left in it at all. That is the secret. Bacteria and mold need water to grow, and by using dried fruit cooked down to a paste, the filling has almost no water for anything to spoil in. Then you fold that filling into a circle of dough, crimp it into a half moon, and instead of baking it, you fry it in hot lard until the outside seals into a hard, golden crust. That fried crust is the second half of the secret. The frying drives the moisture out of the outer shell and creates a barrier almost like a natural wrapper sealing the whole thing. Between the low-moisture dried apple filling and the fried sealed crust, you end up with a hand pie that will keep for a week or two at room temperature, in a pail, in a field, in the heat, without any refrigeration whatsoever. I have seen references to these fried schnitz pies in Pennsylvania Dutch cooking records going back to the 1800s, and they were specifically the food of travel and field work and long journeys. This was the Amish energy bar, 100 years before anyone invented the energy bar, and it beat the energy bar on every count because it was delicious and it cost pennies. Let me walk your hands through it because I want you to actually make this. Take your dried apples, about 2 cups, and simmer them in just enough water to cover until they are soft. Then mash them and keep cooking, stirring, until the mixture is thick and most of the liquid is gone, and sweeten it with sugar and a good spoon of cinnamon. You want a paste you could almost roll into a ball. Let it cool. Now roll out a simple pie dough, cut circles about the size of a saucer, put a spoon of the apple paste on one half, fold the dough over into a half moon, and press the edges tight with a fork so nothing can leak. Fry them in hot fat until deep gold on both sides, or if you would rather, Bake them at a high heat until the crust is firm and browned. What you will hold in your hand is the exact food that carried Amish families through their hardest working days for well over a century. Sweet, portable, filling, and shelf-stable, made from an apple you dried yourself in a dough that costs almost nothing. The first time I made a batch on my own without Fannie watching, I set one on the counter and left it there on purpose for 10 days just to test what she had told me. On the 10th day, I ate it, and it was still good, and I sat there almost in tears because I realized I was holding a piece of knowledge that had kept people alive and happy through winters and harvests for 200 years, and that the world had very nearly thrown it in the trash. That is the thing I most want you to take from all of this. These 25 snacks, the dried apples and the dried corn, the soft pretzels and the cinnamon flats, the popcorn balls and the church spread, the molasses taffy and the maple sugar, the cracker pudding and the whoopie pies and the fried schnitz pies. They were never just recipes. They were a whole way of thinking that said your kitchen can be a place that makes, not just a place that buys. Every one of these was designed to turn a little into a lot, to waste nothing, to feed a family through a hard season on the strength of a woman's 2 hands and her patience. We did not lose these snacks because they stopped tasting good. We lost them because it became profitable for us to forget them. And you do not have to stay forgotten. That is the whole point of my sitting here telling you this. You can start tonight with a bag of apples and your own oven set as low as it goes and the door propped open with a wooden spoon, the exact way Fannie showed me. You can twist a pretzel this weekend and dunk it in baking soda water and watch it turn glossy and brown just like hers did. You can stretch a single jar of peanut butter into church spread and feed twice as many people from it. None of this requires a farm or a permit or a single special tool. It only requires that you decide the old way was never really beneath you, that it was taken from you, and that you want it back. You are the kind of person who already suspects that a lot of what we call progress was really just someone finding a new way to charge you for what you used to do for free. If that is you, then these snacks belong to you because you will actually use them and you will taste the difference and you will feel that small, quiet power of making something with your own hands that the store wanted you to buy. That feeling is what Fannie gave me in that cold kitchen, and it is what I am trying to give you right now. So let me ask you something, and I truly want you to answer me. Of everything I showed you today, which one are you going to make first? The fried schnitz pie that lasts 2 weeks in a field? Or the dried sweet corn that comes back tasting like caramel? Or the church spread that stretches one jar into a feast? Tell me in the comments, because I read them, and I want to know which of these old snacks is going to live again in your kitchen. And if you would, tell me where you are watching from, because it warms my heart to see how far this knowledge is spreading into how many homes. If you felt something today, if you felt like you just got back a small piece of something that should never have been taken, then stay with me, because that is exactly what we do here. One lost skill at a time, brought back from the old kitchens before the last people who remember them are gone. There is a movement of folks quietly relearning all of this, and I would be glad to have you in it. Next time, I am going to show you the Amish way of keeping butter fresh for months without a refrigerator, a trick with a bowl of cold water that I did not believe until I saw it with my own eyes in Fannie's cellar. You are not going to want to miss how simple it turns out to be. Now, this video gave you the overview, but the full recipes, measured and step by step, just the way Fannie taught me, are waiting inside the Plain Living Society. In there, you can ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. And you won't be alone here, you'll belong. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Takes a minute and you can cancel anytime, no risk at all.